I need to know what your plan for the quarterback is. So apparently the owner took him in a room and said, "Don't you worry, don't you worry at all. We're gonna get Kenny Pickett." So hello and welcome to All Four Quarters, your one-stop shop for news, views, and overreactions to all things NFL. It might be the off season, but there's no time off for us. Hey, we got Connor here, and we got Ronan.
Hello.
How are we getting on, Ronan? How's all down in Cork?
Not too bad. Lovely sunny times down here in Costa de Cork, so soaking that in as much as my pale skin allows without turning to a crisp. Big moves on the work front. Publicly announced that we're going to get merged into Siemens. No jokes allowed on that name front. But yeah, we're going to start making televisions apparently. No, not really. But yeah, other than that, it's good. And I saw Sean there over the weekend, so he's in good form. So yeah, good times all around.
Excellent, very good. Yeah, I've been busy in my time off, just working in the garden, so we're kind of turning over the whole garden and putting in a new one. So it's been fun. I've learned that my years of office work have softened me from the child I once was. Uh, Rotavated the garden on the weekend, and my hands are still in bits from running the rotavator for 2 days straight. I would have been well able for that 15 years ago, but maybe not so much now. So still probably about 2 more weeks worth of work and labour to go into that, but then we should be good. So that's pretty fun. And other than that, nothing too wild or crazy. Did you see there the Steelers are holding a draft event in Croke Park?
Yeah, so obviously they've been holding events in Dublin for the last year or so in preparation for the big game coming to Dublin later this year, which you're all obviously hoping to go to as well. But yeah, if you go into the archives of the podcast, we obviously did many years ago the live
The live draft. Yeah, it was a great episode.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but it is like if the Super Bowl is one thing, like staying all night for the Super Bowl, hanging around all night to watch names being slowly drawn off a card, like named off a card, isn't quite the same level of momentum to keep you going. So
Yeah,
you definitely need to find your own mechanisms to keep yourself alive throughout an entire draft.
As I recall, that fabulous like 4 hour long episode also involves like a 4 minute period where we just go out the back to have a cigarette and leave no one on the mic because we're just waiting between turns. It's yeah.
Well, live streams are very common now, so we were just ahead of the game, really.
Yeah, we're just pioneers. It's. Very good. I suppose we'll chat about some of the stuff that have happened. So what we're going to do this episode is we're going to look at the kind of review of free agency so far, where a lot of the guys have gone, who's still out there, highlight a couple of teams that have done well or poorly out of it. But before we get into that, I suppose we'll have a look at all the news since we were talking to you last. So I suppose we'll start with the owners meeting. So the owners meeting just happened. For those who don't know, the owners meet up a couple of times a year. At this one in particular, they tend to discuss rule changes to the game, and so on. This is where things like the change to the kickoff rule happened, and all the discussion every year about onside kicks becoming 4th and 18s or something like that. But yeah, there was a couple of interesting ones tabled this year, a couple of less interesting ones. We'll fly through them relatively quickly, and you can kind of say what you think about them. So new rules coming in this season: dynamic kickoffs that were brought in last year have been made permanent, and the touchback has been moved from 30 yards to 35 yards. So I don't think these achieved quite what they wanted last year. They wanted to have more returns. They wanted it to be more, it's in the name, I suppose, dynamic. This move from the 30 yard to the 35 yard line makes a bit of sense in that you make it more punitive to just kick a touchback so that people are less likely to do it. I understand that. I also think they could just have the kicker kick it from further back so that they can't get touchbacks. That's also an option. But yeah, what do you make of this?
Yeah, you could just do both, of course. But
Yeah.
I think obviously very different type of kickoff. They didn't have much data. The data suggested that on average kicks that were returned were coming out to the 31-yard line on average, I believe. So you weren't getting much of a premium for returning the ball based to the default of 30 yards. And certain teams, I think the Rams, very quickly just decided to kick it out the back end, basically what was there before. And some teams continued to kick it into the danger zone, but most teams just reverted to just kicking it long. I think obviously an additional 5 yards is very big in the context of the American football. That has a substantial effect in terms of your chance of scoring points in that drive. Like you're only like say 20 yards or so from basically being able to kick a long field goal at that point. So, I think it's one of these things you have to keep iterating on. I think the principle of the idea hasn't been shown enough to dismiss it as this being a failed experiment. But I think the main reason they moved to this kickoff, I think, is primarily is it took away a lot of the most dangerous points of the kickoff rule. And I think it has succeeded in that. And so they're happy to just kind of iterate to find something which both is now much safer because no one moves until the ball is actually caught. But which hopefully also provides more opportunities for kickoffs to actually occur and, for more exciting plays to occur in the special teams arena.
Yeah, so we'll see how this develops over time. Next up, regular season overtime has been moved to the postseason rules, kind of, where each team is guaranteed to touch the ball or have a drive in overtime, although it's remaining at 10 minutes. Philly did propose pushing it to 15 minutes, but they're keeping it at 10. Um, yeah, I kind of see it, the wanting to have two teams have possession of the ball. Unsure, presumably this just means you want to eat as much time off the clock as well when you've got it, and still advantages this advantages the first team if they can do a slow rolling drive. What happens if they run out the 10 minutes, Ronan?
I think if they run to 10 minutes and then don't score for whatever reason, I don't know, unlikely scenario, I think it just turns into a tie, basically.
Okay.
I think any situation where the teams are equal at the point at which the clock goes to 10 minutes, then it is a tie. So I think you're right, but I do think it kind of balanced that a little bit. Like one of the criticisms of this new format in the playoffs is that it does give a slight advantage to the team that goes second because they have knowledge of what they need to do exactly. And so you could argue that the first team having the slight advantage of being able to kind of pressure the other team by eating up clock or having more control over that. And to be fair, if you can achieve a 10-minute drive, which is not easy to do, then one could argue that is it's a noticeable achievement to kind of create that. So I would say on balance, I think giving each team the opportunity at least one chance. Obviously, just for clarity, that the previous rule was that that if you scored a touchdown on your first drive, then the other team didn't get a chance to respond.
Yeah.
I think overall, I think this is a better solution. I think we haven't seen it much in the playoffs, but I do think it's better than what we had in the playoffs previously, where teams would just like Patrick Mahomes didn't get a chance to beat New England, and Buffalo didn't get a chance to beat Patrick Mahomes and all this kind of stuff. I think we've seen better opportunities going forward with this rule set. So it might mean the more ties, but as dirty Europeans, we're perhaps less biased against ties and not like being some kind of unnatural outcome of a football game.
Yeah, they've brought in replay assist to help with clear and obvious mistakes for things like face masks, head neck contact, horse collars, and so on. So there will be someone in the ear to be able to say, "Oh, that's incorrect there." Although, from what I understand, it's only going to be able to pick up flags. It's not going to be able to throw flags. So this means they'll only be able to say that was thrown incorrectly rather than you missed something there. Which, given that this is largely, let's be honest, running a response to what happened to, was it Sam Darnold in that playoff game where he got absolutely creamed early on, or was that?
Well, there was some controversial calls. I think there was some calls in favor of the Chiefs in the Houston game. So I do this could lead to a different equilibrium in terms of the balance of proof for refs. They might go, I think that if they think it was one of these calls, then they'll just give it, and then replay assist comes in and says.
I was going to say, do we think that they're going to be more likely to flag these things given they know that there's someone's going to be in the ear to rectify it if needs be?
I think it depends how it goes. I think what we saw replay assist since it's come in is that last year it worked really well. You barely even noticed it within the context of watching as a TV product. So if they can do it on that quick basis and turn things over in less than 30 seconds for these objective mistakes, it's objective mistakes in these calls where either the face mask was pulled or wasn't pulled, then I think they will do that. If it turns into a more involved process closer to kind of replay review for touchdowns and stuff, which takes a much longer period, then they might be more judicious about maybe closer to where we are currently. I do think to some extent refs will probably err on the side of, if I think it's a flag, I'll throw it now, but how much they'll do that, it depends on how good it is. But I think replay assist was overall a big benefit to just watching the sport and having fewer of these interruptions for minute minute reviews of things which are obvious once you looked at it once or twice had been made incorrectly on the field. And
Hmm.
obviously, like, to be fair to refs, like, it's an impossible job to be correct 100% of the time given what they're trying to view and the speed at which the game plays. But yeah, I think overall, I would expect this to be overall a positive benefit and lead to less scenarios where the refs are getting absolutely get out because they made a mistake, and understandably so.
Yeah, and finally the old 10 yards of chain is going to be retired, or well, it's going to be held for a backup. The chains are going to be replaced by Hawkeye technology for first down calls. So this has been in place for years in tennis, Gaelic football, like lots and lots and lots of sports have this already. So basically, it's a digital tracker for the position of the ball to be able to say where it is. There was a couple of controversial decisions on whether things were or were not first down. So this is obviously in a response to that. I believe they've been talking about it for a while, but the limitation was having the technology rolled out to all the stadiums because they need to have it in everywhere for it to be usable. The chains are going to be kept and used as a backup anyway, but yeah, like this just kind of makes sense at this stage. It's surprising that it's lasted this long to be such a like low tech solution to a problem.
Yeah, like, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think obviously these first down calls can be controversial, and you've seen examples like putting the card between the chain
Mm,
and the ball, and all these kind of like weird scenarios. So I think something more accurate for these kind of high stakes, very close scenarios makes sense. I think it'll be interesting to see how efficient it is. If it's very efficient, then may consider the long term trend is to this basically become the default way the ball is spotted for all downs and all scenarios. But I would expect that to be much further into the future. I think for now, just these cases where it's very unclear exactly where the first down was. Let Hawkeye decide. Go. We're all familiar with the in tennis or even in GAA where you get the digital representation on the screen and it kind of shows whether it was tall or kneel in GAA or if it's in or out for tennis. And I would imagine that's probably what we'll mostly see, just kind of some digital ball and then there'll be a line and then it'll show it was slightly over the line and that's a first down type of situation. So yeah, like, I think overall I think it makes sense just to kind of make that a little less arbitrary, because let's be frank, like, the way it's currently done wasn't as exact as would be implied by the way the refs treated the chains as being very exact with like the cardboard and stuff like that.
no, indeed. A couple of other smaller ones. Thursday night football flexibility has been moved to 21 days notice, whereas previously it was 28. So they can move games in and out of Thursday night football a little bit quicker. Players are now allowed to have calls, or sorry, the teams are allowed to call 5 free agent players now during the legal tampering period. Previously, they were only allowed to talk with agents, although it's widespread belief that a lot more than that happens, but this means they can have a couple of official calls in that period. They've banned the nose wipe celebration. Throwback and alternate jerseys are now going to be allowed to be used 4 times a year. There's some changes to the number of IR designations that cut down in playoffs. Big ones that might impact things that you'll be watching a little bit more directly. There's now going to be 3 Christmas games because obviously they saw how successful that was for just getting eyes on the sport. So they're going to have 3 of those now. Players are going to be able to compete or attempt to compete for flag football at the Olympics in 2026, but they're going to need their team's permission to do so. So that means there is the chance of seeing a few of these guys being able to suit up, and playoff teams will now be eligible to be forced to do hard knocks. Hard knocks is having a tough time at the moment, so this will probably just an attempt to expand who they can force into doing it so they can try and get a bit more maybe high wattage situations in place. So those are a couple of the smaller ones that were passed. The tush push, as always at these things, came up. They're looking to ban it, or well, roughly 50% of them are looking to ban it. So essentially, what has gone from previously a few people not wanting it has now gone to a lot of people not wanting it. But the way that these votes work is you need to have, is it 3 quarters, Ronan? I think 24 or something like that.
Yeah, I think you need a yeah.
Yeah,
You need
so I
to
think you need 24 people to vote for something to pass. They were at kind of 16-16 or in that kind of area based on discussions. So they've tabled that till the May 22 meeting. So we'll kind of see whether that changes. They're also having a discussion's been pushed then about seeding being based on record rather than division winners. So obviously the likes of the Vikings, who would have had, I think, the second seed,
Yeah,
except because they were a runner-up, they had to be the fifth seed and go on the road, would be the prime recent example of this. But essentially, that a team with a better record but that doesn't win its division should not have to then be on the road to a team that won its division with 8 games.
yeah, and the tush push ban. The argument in favor of it is that it's reciprocal because the defense, it is banned to push players on the defense to kind of create more leverage there. So the argument is to revert to the status quo that existed, I think, in the mid 2000s in the NFL, where offensive players were also not allowed to push each other. And to be fair, like I don't think the push part of the tush push is actually the main reason why it works. I think it's just a really effectively managed, sneak play.
Yeah.
Just the Eagles have become really good at it.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
So
I saw some coverage of it. They're like, quite a lot of their ones this year run out of that formation don't even have the push in it anymore. It's just incredibly good line play.
yeah, and I think the pusher will probably become more of a. They'll probably look to more get ahead of the player and block rather than try and provide them additional momentum. It's kind of almost like the rules for maul in rugby. So I think there is some momentum there, but you'd say it's kind of 50-50. I think it's tough to see it getting all the way up to like 24
No,
teams.
I don't think
agreeing to
it's
this.
getting banned this year anyway.
But it'll probably keep coming up because I think
Yeah.
certain people just don't really like it.
And the
I think,
NFL are harping quite a lot about it being an injury risk play. And an interesting thing, Ronan, particularly given that you work in statistics, they've done modeling on it to say that it, even though it hasn't had the injury impact that people feared, that their analysis suggests that it will do.
yeah, so I think that's one of those situations you can do modeling and you can show that there is a risk. And I'd say almost most of the risk, or much of the risk, probably comes from defenses becoming more and more desperate to stop it and what kind of strategies they're developing to try and stop it. So I know, for example, like Chris Jones in the Super Bowl, he attempted to kind of get underneath the center.
Yeah, he
and,
went sideways and injured his
yeah,
neck.
yeah.
It
So
was what we can do is it's a scientific experiment. He disproved that hypothesis, unfortunately,
yeah,
on a large scale.
so I think the NFL or the owners who are in favor of banning it would mostly make the reciprocal argument, but they would also make the argument, well, like there's enough evidence here, precautionary principle, which is very un-American, so make of that what you will, that, let's not risk that scenario occurring. Let's just ban it because this is not a play that needs to exist. And I think, like it's not like the QB sneak is a safe play overall by itself anyway. Like, as a Chiefs fan, you're well aware that the
Yeah, we
major
just
injuries
don't
can
run
happen.
them.
Yeah. So I think for me, I don't see it like it probably would require something severe happening in terms of an injury, which, depending on how you see the evidence, may or may not be likely before I think this is even any chance of actually going true in any given year. So I think it'll probably keep going up every year as long as the Eagles are a successful team who are the kind of vanguard of making this, making third and ones, fourth and ones almost inevitable. Which I think, if you dig under, that's really the reason why I think the NFL and certain owners don't want it, is that this is by NFL standards, a pretty ugly play that's too effective to turn, say, key scenario, these kind of key moments into somewhat of a triviality, it seems to, for teams that can operate this effectively, and they don't want that to happen, right? They want fourth and ones and the third and ones to have a certain amount of jeopardy because they are such key plays in terms of the trajectory of a game. So, I don't see it being banned unless a serious injury does occur, but I think there's enough people there to kind of keep it coming up in the votes for some time to come. As for the seeding thing, I think I again struggle to see this passing. I see the logic for it, but I do feel, once again, seeing this like 75% of owners agreeing to this is probably not going to happen. I think the divisional stuff, it's one of those things which, yes, it's a little bit arbitrary, but so, like, I know some of the divisions, like say the AFC South, don't really have that much pedigree, but some divisions do have a certain pedigree, like the AFC North, for example, where winning that division does mean something given the historical context of it, or even the NFC East, for example. So I don't think that will occur. And like, as a Seahawks fan, I'm probably a little bit biased because, the Seahawks, when they went 7-9 and then the Beastquake happened, that's one of the kind of central starting points of the Pete Carroll era, which turned obviously to be quite successful. So, it's always going to be a little bit arbitrary. I get where they're coming from, but I would doubt that this will pass. I think divisions.
No, I don't think it's going to pass. I'd support it. I think a 14-win team shouldn't be traveling to a 10-win team.
Yeah.
But
I think the divisions just have that little element of prestige, and this is the little tidbit that they get. But yeah, I can see why some people might consider it to be arbitrary, and that the best team should have the best seeding, so we have the best chance of getting the best teams into the later stages. So we have the best NFC Championship game, the best Super Bowls, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they've also rejected automatic first down, removing the automatic first down for holding an illegal contact, and also a proposal to have the 90-man roster exclude IR players in the preseason. But yeah, so that's kind of that. Those are the main notes
Well, well,
from
we're
the.
obviously missing the big one, which is that kickers get to have a practice ball before games as well, not
Hmm.
just regular plays in terms of practice before a game.
Very good.
Yeah,
We'll move over to crime and punishment. What's happening? Probably felonies? No, it's not.
nah.
Buffalo defensive lineman Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi have both been suspended for 6 games for PEDs. They both signed as free agents there in Buffalo. We were aware of the Hoyt one incoming. We didn't know about the Ogunjobi one incoming. So obviously not a great starting point for that defensive line to have two of the guys out for 6 games. Yeah, just don't do drugs.
Yeah, so I think from Buffalo's point of view, obviously while they're suspended, they won't be paid, and that'll just kind of probably be pro rata included in their contract negotiations. I don't think either of these guys are expected to be like the starters. These would probably be like your third or fourth defensive lineman in terms of the interior and the edge. Hoyt is kind of a hybrid player. He kind of plays edge. He plays a bit internal. He plays a bit linebacker. He's quite flexible. So I think with Hoyt, they knew when that it became publicly known that they had signed him that he had a PED suspension. Ogunjobi, I think basically they didn't know when they agreed. Before they signed papers, basically Ogunjobi did let them know that it was going to happen, so they did have the opportunity to back out at that point, and they chose to go through with it anyway. So in neither case did these guys kind of get one over the Bills. I think the Bills would obviously look at the rest of their division, which is looking not great at the moment. It probably looks like for next year, and say we can afford to maybe not have our full complement for the first 6 weeks, and then bring these guys in over the course of the season, and hopefully have them at tip-top condition for when the football really matters in the playoffs, which
Hmm.
they would probably definitely expect to get into based on the current strength of their division. But yeah, a little bit of an unusual situation to sign two players who have PED violations, but hopefully the PEDs weren't the primary reason why they played at the high level that they have in the recent years.
Hmm. We had a retirement as well. Wide receiver Julio Jones is retired after 13 years. He spent 10 of those years with Atlanta. Was kind of a top end elite wide receiver with two All Pro seasons. Had some incredible catches in that ultimately doomed Super Bowl that they had 28-3. But he ends his career with 13,703 yards and 66 touchdowns. Was kind of right up there at the top of his game at the height of his powers, and I'd imagine we're looking at a gold jacket here.
Eventually, I don't think he'll get in first ballot. He's not at that level, but I do
Yeah.
think he's one of those guys that I think he's like in kind of 15th all time, and there's not that many people around them who would look to be competing. Like he's around just above DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins might get there eventually, but I wouldn't expect it too much. I think Julio Jones' peak was as that prototypical wide receiver one, that elite wide receiver that wins one on one, that wins over the middle, kind of maybe the closest we've had to Calvin Johnson in the last 10 years or so since Calvin Johnson retired. And I think was obviously kind of part of some really great Atlanta teams in terms of their offenses and the Matt Ryan era. But as you say, never really got over the hump, which might also stand against him, even though there's obviously nothing he could do about the 28-3. Mostly, I would say. So look, a really, really great player, a player who probably could definitely eventually make it to the Hall of Fame, but probably have to wait his turn to get in there. He's in that kind of area, similar guys like Torrey Holt who haven't got in yet, so hopefully he gets there eventually. But he was a dominant wide receiver, so if you just take him on his peak, he definitely was Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah, so let's have a look at some of the extensions that have come out since we were chatting. So obviously we're going to focus in on a couple of teams for the free agency in a bit and look at the position by position what's left out in the market. But these are the few guys that were kind of staying where they were. Cincinnati decided, do you know what? We'll give Joe Burrow what he wants. We'll give him his toys. So wide receiver Jamar Chase has signed a 4-year, $161 million deal, and T. Higgins a 4-year, $115 million deal. Interestingly, after ditching his agent and firing Jamar Chase's agent, which is quite funny, Chase is now the highest non-quarterback contract, breaking Garrett's, who we'll talk about in a second, by 1 million. But yeah, like this is a huge amount of money to be paying to wide receivers. It's a lot of money tied up there, particularly when you've got your franchise quarterback getting paid, and normally you would expect a franchise quarterback to be the kind of guy who can elevate lesser players. This is a lot of money to be spending on wide receivers, and will probably have an impact on what they can do with the rest of the roster building. It is a phenomenal duo. I do think T. Higgins has probably cost himself money here, but he's been stuck in that kind of tag, second tag area, and no doubt he just kind of looked at it and said, "Look, I want to take a lump of guaranteed money at this stage." But yeah, like looking at what people are getting on the free agency market, comparing them to T Higgins in a year's time, he's definitely left some money behind to just get that locked down right now.
For sure, and I think it's definitely a situation where, like, part of it's that he was tagged, so he didn't have full control here. But even trying not to kind of force the issue and get traded this off season, I think T Higgins has taken a little bit of a discount, not a huge discount, but a little bit of discount that he would have got on the free agency market, where he would have got a lot of money from probably like New England or some other team. But he's obviously likes the relationship he has with Jamar Chase and with Joe Burrow and wants to continue to explore that. And it's a contract which I think the headline number is nice, but I think when people dug into the details, suggests that, basically after the first 2 years, he doesn't have that much security with the team. So if he continues to be very injury prone, which he has been in his career so far, the Cincinnati can always cut bait at that point. But Jamar Chase, like, he's a stud. He gets a proper contract, which has lots of guarantees, and he's basically there for the long term with Joe Burrow, which makes a lot of sense because he is a prototypical wide receiver one in that kind of Julio Jones type stature that we just talked about, and it makes a lot of sense just to lock him up. And as I said, like, the price for him was kept going up every moment you wait. He's just going to go up in price, and they end up paying top of the market for it, and they probably could have done something earlier. But yeah, Jamar Chase, he's probably worth every penny here. I do think you're correct, and I think we've discussed this during the preview for each in terms of T Higgins. Like, does an elite quarterback really need two elite wide receivers? It's his job not to kind of turn like Andre Yusufos into a workable wide receiver too, especially when the biggest problems with the Bengals is that Joe Burrow keeps getting injured. He's like a twice comeback player of the year winner, which is not the award you want to be winning necessarily for your quarterback.
No.
So big questions there. But like, look, they've gone for the dramatic option, and as you said, this was an option that basically Joe Burrow, I feel like he basically said, this
He
is what
demanded
I
it,
want. And I think the team, similar to, like, say, Peyton Manning with the Colts back in the day, is like, okay, well, what you want, you get. I think basically it leaves one big uncertainty for them for the remainder of the offseason, which is the Trey Hendrickson situation. Like, they basically, like, rumors suggest that they're looking for a first round for Trey Hendrickson, and teams are going like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's ridiculous. So that's still up in the air. And then apparently I think some of the ownership brass kind of said things about Hendrickson where they basically said, just be happy, man, don't worry about it. And Hendrickson was not very happy about those type of comments coming from the owner, not from the owner, but from the kind of ownership group, executive group. So yeah, like, I think that will probably rumble on for a while longer. But I think Joe Burrow is also angling for Hendrickson to get paid if he can, but I think these two guys are the guys that obviously make the biggest difference for him, so they've got the priority, and now well paid, and they'll be sticking around at least for the next couple of years in Higgins' case. And Jamar Chase, I expect, unless something goes very wrong, he'll be there with Cincinnati for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. No, looking at the Higgins contract structure, I would imagine that they're going to try and develop a wide receiver over the next 2 years and then sell him off in 2 years' time. But that'll be my reading of it anyway. Cleveland's edge rusher Myles Garrett penned an emotional breakup with the city of Cleveland, saying he wanted to go and win somewhere, and they said, "Or do you want $160 million over 4 years?" And he said, "No, I need to know what your plan for the quarterback is." So apparently the owner took him in a room and said, "Don't you worry. Don't you worry at all. We're going to get Kenny Pickett." And he said, "I'm in." God damn it, I'm in. So Myles Garrett briefly becomes the highest non-quarterback contract until the Jamar Chase one came through. $160 million, boatload of money. He's already quite old, so like if he sees the end of this contract, he'll be doing well. Yeah, Cleveland just wanted to lock it down. It makes sense. He's very good. I would have liked to have seen him on a good team instead.
Yeah, like, look, I think certain people have been pushing him to what he was told about the quarterback situation, but apparently all he did is smile. But he seems to be convinced by this big boatload of money, plus whatever plans the team has, which I think at this point they've basically said, they had a big swing and a miss on Deshaun Watson. So I think it's pretty clear Deshaun Watson is not part of the future plans of this team. Obviously he's not going to play next year due to the Achilles injury anyway, but beyond that even, despite his contract continuing to take up a lot of the cap space for the next 3 years, I think. So look, for Myles Garrett, like, look, the team probably kind of said we have a plan, whether that be trading for Kirk Cousins or whether that be drafting Shadur Sanders or whatever it happens to be, or and here is a crap ton of money, and he took the deal, and like, I know it was a little bit annoying because he wasn't as, fans are like, well, he said he's going to leave, or what does he really care about? But like, look, it's a business, man. They know it's a business. We know it's a business. Don't get too attached to people, and don't throw stones at someone who's been a great servant for your team and who's certainly been productive and worth that number one overall pick that you gave him. Took him for several years ago.
Yeah. Buffalo have decided to re-up a large group of people. So Josh Allen gets a 6-year, $330 million extension. Edge rusher Greg Rousseau gets a 4-year, $80 million deal. Christian Benford, 4 years, $69 million. And linebacker Terrell Bernard, 4 years, $42 million. These all make sense. Frankly, like, you're locking down Josh Allen. Not much needs to be said about that. Makes sense. It's a decent price for him. Whatever. Greg Rousseau, they suppose they need to lock him in because obviously there's a lot of moving parts on that defensive line and on the edge as well, and they want a bit of stability, and this is obviously their next big hit. Cornerback Benford has earned that contract, and Bernard is actually, it's a pretty good price, frankly, 42 million for 4 years.
Yeah, like, it makes a lot of sense. Like, just basically putting Josh Allen on the Patrick Mahomes plan, which is
Yeah.
where, effectively there's like a 8-year runway if you include the existing contract and void years and all that, where they can just basically move money back and forth depending on what the cap space situation is, or what they need to do. And they've obviously spent some of that money straight up on Greg Rousseau, who's a good, perhaps not elite pass rusher, but this is a fairly good contract if you compare it to, say, what was being given out in free agency, or recent extensions. See Myles Garrett, although he's not the Myles Garrett. Christian Benford's a good cornerback, not elite, but once again, solid contract. And Terrell Bernard, similar, good contract, not elite. But I think, the main thing that we're learning is that if we assume the cap continues to grow at the rate it has done for the last 3 or 4 years, then it's just quicker, easier and cheaper to get these deals done now. And Buffalo have taken it on board and prevented a kind of logjam of free agents being in their inbox next season, because like all these guys would have been, except for Josh Allen, would have been available next offseason and been high on the list of teams who are desperate to improve their team. So get it done now, don't have to worry, and then next year you have much less problems.
Arizona reset the tight end market with Trey McBride, 4 years, $76 million. Look, he was great last year. Didn't find the paint an awful lot, but was just phenomenal for them in terms of yardage and catches. So makes sense. He's young, lock him up, get the best years out of him.
Yeah, exactly. Same argument. Lock these guys up early. Don't wait for it, and these contracts only get more expensive. It slightly resets the tight end market. He's not making that much more money. I think, reports that George Kittle will probably be using this as a baseline for his extension. But yeah, he's obviously more of a joker receiving type tight end rather than anything else. But he's been very effective with Kyler Murray. He's probably their second best receiver. Probably even their best receiver, depending how you view Marvin Harrison Jr.'s development this year. And yeah, a vital part of that offense. So why not keep him, and why not give him a contract? And if you compare his kind of contract to what washed up wide receivers are getting, I think it's very, very good value.
Yeah, no, definitely. Houston and Carolina both locked down cornerbacks, resetting the market one after another. So Derek Stingley, the quarterback for Houston, 3-year, $90 million. So he's currently the holder of the top contract. J.C. Horn for Carolina got a 4-year, $100 million, $25 million a year deal off Carolina beforehand. Both again make sense. Like, young talented guys, get them here, decent price, and like it's a recurring theme of late, Ronan, on the free agency preview, that like, you normally don't get that much in the cornerback market that's not got question marks attached to it, so you want to lock these guys down, and this keeps them in place for 3-4 years each.
And of course, cornerback's one of those positions where you basically have to be young. There's very few cornerbacks that are elite as they enter their 30s. So lock these guys down. Like, there's questions over both. I think less over Stingley. I think his highs have been all pro type play, and he had a really great year last year. He had some injuries earlier on in his career and during college that a little bit concerned, but I think he's outplayed those and earned a top of the market contract. Horn has missed a lot of games during his NFL career, but he has flashed as a Pro Bowl type talent. And as I said, he's young and he's not going to get cheaper next season. So if you see him as part of your future, as one of your cornerstones, and for Carolina, they don't have a huge amount of those right now, why lock him up and get it cheaper now than it would be, and with less stress than next year.
And the other thing is that given the dearth of these guys, as you say, on the market, they're always pretty decent in trade if you decide that it's not working out for you in a year's time. Like, people will often look at these guys and go, reclamation contract, basically, as well, when it's $25 million a year for the likes of Horn in a year's time, 2 years time, they'll go, well, that might be cheap compared to what the market is at that stage. So Tampa Bay lockdown, Chris Godwin, he's going to run it back with them. 3 years, 66 million. Makes sense, I suppose. I think he could have gotten paid a little bit more elsewhere, but obviously, he knows the system. He's been there the whole time. He gets to play alongside Evans. It works.
Yeah, so him and Ronnie Stanley kind of were the two big names we had in our free agency preview who ended up not making it to the market. Ronnie Stanley got 3 years, 60 million, and I think in both cases they're on their second contract, so they're getting basically their second main contract. So money isn't as big a motivator
Hmm.
for them as the first one, and both of them are very comfortable with the position they are, that they're going to have successful careers going forward and probably maximize their value in the long run by sticking with something that they know. I think with Godwin, yeah, he probably would get a lot of money from like a team like New England if he made free agency, but he likes Tampa Bay, and the vibes around Tampa Bay, we've kind of discussed this several years now. They're nice, they're fine, and it's in Miami. Sorry, it's in Florida, which seems to be a good place to proto retire effectively. And Stanley, similarly, like he's just happy protecting Lamar Jackson, and yeah, he could have got a boatload of money probably free agency as a anyway efficient left tackle, but he's happy enough to take the good contract here rather than the all the money contract, and yeah, I'm sure he's happy with that.
Yeah. Well, on that then, will we have a look at some of the big movers and shakers in free agency? So yeah, so we'll kick off. We'll have a look at two or three teams that have been kind of quite active and talk through their moves. So we were hemming and hawing about which ones to go with, and for absolutely no reason at all, we decided to start with Seattle. So Seattle are undergoing quite a lot of changes here. I'd say, Ronan, probably more changing even than you were expecting going into the off season. So they obviously traded away Geno Smith and DK Metcalf and cut Tyler Lockett. So that's kind of a lot of what was the offense of the Seahawks for the last couple of years, all gone. They then signed Sam Darnold, 3 years, $100 million, and Cooper Kupp, 3 years, $45 million, to kind of replace those positions, and then a couple of more role players as well, the likes of Marquez Valdez Scantling and so on. Um, they haven't really done much. So, like, I would say, Ronan, the biggest criticism that we had over the last year or two of this team have been that, man, Gino's having to work really hard behind this offensive line, right? Like, the offensive line has been an issue, and it doesn't really seem to have been addressed a lot. They picked up Josh Jones, but not much change. So they must be looking at the draft for that. Couple of changes on the defensive line side. Demarcus Lawrence has come in, Draymond Jones is gone, and then kind of re-signing their own guys like Jones at linebacker and Reed on the defensive line. How are you feeling about Seattle compared to, say, where they were last year? Are you positive, negative, or push?
Probably push. Like I'm not happy, but I'm also like it's easy when you're in a situation like Seattle where they got 10 wins last year. They've never been a bad team, even towards the end of the Pete Carroll era, and it's easier to just kind of keep going with what you were going. And like they made that big change when they traded away Russell Wilson a few years ago. Now they brought on Geno Smith, and there's kind of two ways to be like a mediocre to bad team. There's the fun way and there's the unfun way. And Geno Smith, just due to the story and the fact that he was a big personality and I didn't write back and all that kind of stuff, was a fun way, and it was easy to just kind of coast that wave and just kind of go, well, at least it's fun, but at the mediocre. But I do think that the team and Mike McDonald, obviously, was brought in to replace Pete Carroll, have basically made the risky but understandable decision to go, okay, we need to actually fundamentally change the DNA of this team and basically restart from scratch. So, we're going to get rid of the people who don't fit with what we want to do. So Geno Smith is traded away and we bring in Sam Darnold. Do I think that's an upgrade? Not really. In terms of on the field play, I think Geno Smith is probably a better quarterback right now, but obviously Darnold is in his mid-20s. He obviously came into the NFL very young and has a lot more upside, and they obviously probably want to do a completely different type of offense this year, which is much more reliant on running the ball, play action, and type of stuff, which Geno is capable of, but which isn't Geno's natural game. He's a guy who's kind of like the spread and shred type offenses where he was fully in control and he was running things kind of from the from shotgun. That's kind of what he wanted to do, and that didn't necessarily vibe with what Mike McDonald wants his offenses to do and look like. And obviously that kind of reflects what happened in the offseason with Ryan Grubb, the old OC who was from the college game, has been replaced with Clint Kubiak, who's obviously, basically down, like very much down on the bottom level of the kind of Shanahan Kubiak type tree of like outside zone and play action, all that kind of stuff. So, for that type of scheme where Darnold isn't being expected to do a lot of kind of diagnosing the play and stuff like that, just run the play as it's designed, take the half field reads, use the big arm to take what's there. Like, I think that's fine. I'm probably like less impressed with the idea of getting rid of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Like Metcalf, like, look, he's a big personality. I think a lot of this was probably here. He's apparently been requesting trades for multiple off seasons now, and he is a bit of a knucklehead, to be frank. So it'll be interesting to see how him and George Pickens get on in Pittsburgh. But like, I think it's a big risk to take, because Metcalf does have certain skills that are non-replicable, and certainly not replicable by like a Cooper Kupp, who hasn't been anywhere near his best for several years now, and Lockett like probably near the end of his career. But that made sense right up until they signed Cooper Kupp. But I really don't like the Cooper Kupp signing.
Yeah, I'd be the same.
I think he's a bit washed, but his contract, the headline number 3 for 45, is similar to the T. Higgins situation, where I think they can get out of it basically after the first year, more or less, without any issue, if he does not show any spark of who he previously was. So I think on the offense, it's all going to be about JSN and the run game, I think. And JSN obviously did break out as kind of the de facto wide receiver one there, so I kind of understand why they did it. But, I still probably would prefer to have DK and not have DK, especially if we're going to move to a big play-oriented offense where DK does thrive generally. The offensive line, I am very concerned about that. Like, I think there was reports they were trying to sign Will Fries, who was one of the best free agent guards on the market. But John Schneider is notorious for cheaping out in the offensive line, for not saying that we should invest, especially in the interior offensive line in free agency, and basically he's going to roll the dice and go with the interior offensive linemen they've drafted in previous years, and presumably with now I think 5 top 100 picks, additional players in the draft for the interior offensive line and for the defensive line generally. So yeah, if the offensive line is as bad as it was last year with Sam Darnold in tow and not being able to run the ball, this could get very ugly very quickly. But they've obviously decided we need to do something to make this more like the offense we want, which is probably not that much fun, but which is one which is effective and which complements with the defense of Mike McDonald, which did play at a very high level in the back half of the year. On the defense, they make a couple of minor changes. Like, I don't really consider DeMarcus Lawrence to be that much of an upgrade over Draymond Jones, and he's kind of overpaid as well based on his contract. But they did get back Ernest Jones, who they traded for last season, and I think they played at a really good level, so I'm glad that happened. And Jaron Reed, he's a veteran defensive lineman who's been playing a good level, so nice to see. But yeah, I would say overall, this is a higher risk maneuver than you would expect from the Seahawks, who for many years we kind of said, are they going to do something different, or is it going to continue to be like 9 and 8 forever? They've decided to do something significant. They decided to go all in on the Mike McDonald era and his vision for what this team should be. Let's see if it works out, but your guess is good as mine of whether it will or not.
Yeah, I think how they approach the draft will be very telling. Like, if they just go into the draft and they go, we'll get a player for here, a player for here, a player for here, kind of paste over cracks, I'd be worried. If they go into the draft and like, we're going to spend 3 picks on offensive linemen because we want to try and build a young core or something like, or whatever they want to go with on that. But like, I want to see a vision emerging from the draft selections.
And I think it is important to note that based on the draft analysis I've done so far, this is a good and deep interior offensive line class. So if they're seeing that and they're going, well, we think we get great players, multiple great players in the arterial offensive line in the draft because the quality of the draft class this year is high, then at least there's some logic to that. And at least it's unlikely they're going to like reach for a whole bunch of guys, which it can happen if you're desperate for like a left tackle. You just go for the best left tackle even if they're not great,
Yeah. New England Patriots were the next one that came up. Obviously, they had a lot of cap space, new coach in tow, developmental young quarterback, kind of wondering what they were going to do. I'm intrigued, I will say, by what they've done. Milton Williams gets a 4-year, $104 million contract, which is a lot of money to be thrown there. Stephon Diggs gets a 3-year, $63.5 million contract, which is a lot of money to be throwing at Stephon Diggs. Although I have read about some of the breakdown in that contract and it being a lot more team friendly than it seems, including a clause which baffles me given the history of this organization and its treatment of some of its players, that they have the ability to get out on medical grounds that if they say that a pre-existing injury that he has and it is causing it, they can just null and void any guarantees. And the person who gets to make that say is the staff doctor for New England, which is just madness to me. Carlton Davis gets 3 years, 60 million as well. Their offensive line has an interesting bit of like they've got Bradbury, Morgan Moses, where Schneider or Schneitzer there. Um, they obviously want to protect their young guy. They want to give him weapons, although I don't think frankly, at this stage, I thought Stephon Diggs was washed a year ago. I'm not sure spending money on bringing him in is going to help. Vrabel decides he wants to bring in his guys as well, so he brings in Spillane and Landry, gets rid of Bentley, Godshow, and so on. It's an interesting one, right? Because there's a lot of moving pieces, but as I go through this list, I'm not seeing the kind of quality pieces that you'd like to be bringing in to support a young player. Milton Williams is fine, but I don't think he's 104 million is good. Stephon Diggs is washed. Carlton Davis is fine, but a bit old. They got the offensive line coming in. Harold Landry, Robert Spillane. Obviously, look, the coach knows them, so they're going to run his scheme, and that's why they're in there. But I get nothing gets me wild excited here. Josh Dobbs is coming in to be the backup. Like yeah, I don't really feel it. They did finally get the trade off. They've spent probably all of the offseason trying to talk up Joe Milton to get him traded. I think they got a fifth for seventh swap for him or so on. Jacoby Brissett's gone as well. Like it's just I wanted to see something out of New England, kind of poking them with a stick, come on, do something style, and I don't feel I'm seeing it here, Ronan. I'm seeing a team that was not in a great place roster wise, essentially treading water is what I'm seeing. And again, maybe they have designs on the draft and they know what they're going for there, but I'm not seeing anything really on this list that's making me go, wow, New England are going to be noticeably better next year than they were last year.
I think that says more about free agency more than New England, though. To be fair, like I don't like when you go through the list of players who eventually got to free agency who were actually available on the market to buy at the best available price. There just wasn't that much available. So like Milton Williams is obviously the biggest acquisition in terms of the contract, and even there, like I think there was reports that Carolina had come to agreement with Williams, and basically it sounds like New England just like barreled into the room. It's like to his agent, but here's all the money in the world, and he's like, okay, I suppose we'll just take all the money, fine. And that I think that kind of forced Carolina to panic into giving Tershawn Wharton a bunch of money, kind of his non-union equivalent for Milton Williams, like backup defensive lineman on a Super Bowl team. But yeah, like Milton Williams, like he has a lot of upside. As we talked about in the free agency preview, he's never been the main guy. But I don't think within this Vrabel scheme he'll be expected to be like suddenly turn into Chris Jones, whatever like that. But he has the upside to at least be a high level defensive lineman if they give support around him. I think Steph Diggs is just mostly like that's what was there. Like there's basically, outside of maybe giving a bunch of money to Davante Adams who ended up going to the Rams, there really wasn't a better option out there unless they went to the trade market. I do think this is a team, I get the sense they don't want to spend their draft capital, that they see the best way to build a team, even if it's still boring, is to do it via the draft. So they don't want to give away picks unless they really have to, because they're obviously not in a win now mode right now. And Carlton Davis, I think, is a solid, plug and play option just to kind of shore things up there. I do think the investing in the offensive line makes sense. Like Bradbury, more of a finesse center. I would have worries there in terms of how he gets overpowered up the middle sometimes, but he's definitely an upgrade over what they had there previously. If David Andrews is going to retire, certainly. They did cut him, but I think reports are he'll probably retire. He's just not the player he used to be. And Morgan Moses is very much the fill-in average right tackle that teams just swap in each year and does a solid job. And Schweitzer's a good flex option across the line. He can play pretty much anywhere if they need to. But yeah, I think I would say the most questionable decision is probably Vrabel giving a bunch of money to Harold Landry, who's just not that good a player. But he's one of his guys from back in Tennessee, so he does it. But I think the other guys he brought along, like Spillane and Jack Gibbons, are safer, like lower cost. Like Spillane got a decent contract for a middle linebacker, but still, by relative terms, not a huge amount of money. So They did decide to move away from Juwan Bentley and Godchow, so I do think Vrabel sees that certain things on this team aren't what he wants. He probably wants faster play. He probably wants more aggressive play than what they were getting previously, and we'll see when that comes together. Like, I think none of us have been particularly, optimistic about the Vrabel era being like a huge paradigm shift for this team.
No.
And as you say, nothing here suggests that's going to change much here. But I think, as I say, unless they're going to get aggressive in training, which I don't think they're in the right stage of the rebuild to do, they did the best of what was out there, basically. So,
It does
I
actually.
don't love it, but I don't hate it.
When we talk about like coaches putting their stamp on things, this does feel very Tennessee Titans 4 years ago, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And like, look, Tennessee were a number one seed. No one liked them, but they were a number one seed. So it is a way of building things, but obviously a lot of that was built on the back of like having Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And you now have an elite young quarterback. So you would love to give the elite young quarterback like DK Metcalf if they traded for him, but they've decided they don't want to do that. They want to build the boring bits, the offensive line, and we'll take Steph Diggs because that's the best available, and that's a choice. But yeah, I think it makes them better than last year. But does it make the big quantum leap that'll get fans excited? I think I agree with you. Probably not.
No. And finally, the New York Giants have decided to turn over a new leaf. It's an exciting new day in New York. Russell Wilson is here on a 1-year, $10.5 million contract. But wait, there's more. Jameis Winston is also here on a 2-year, $8 million contract. They're going to be pairing up to replace Danny Dimes, who's obviously cut towards the back end of last season. But they haven't really changed a huge amount of the surrounding talent, have they? Like, James Hudson is there on the offensive line. It'll help a bit and so on. But like, they've kind of taken a scatter shot. Like these moves are the moves of a coach and a GM who know that they really need to put up or else they're going to lose their jobs. They just went swinging on defense, spending quite a lot of money without maybe getting a wild pile of quality. But as you said, look, some of this is a reflection of what's available in free agency at the moment. So they had Paulson Adebo, cornerback, 3 years, $54 million. Seems a bit pricey. Javon Holland, 3 years, $45 million. Chauncey Golston, 3 years, $18 million. Yeah, Azeez Ojulari is gone from the pass rush on there. They add in Roy Robinson Harris, Chris Board. They lose Isaiah Simmons, Adoree Jackson, and Jason Pinnock are both coming off the back end of that. And they decide, look, they're going to keep Darius Slayton, which is fine, I suppose. There was a lot of chat about him getting more buzz in free agency than I think ever really materialized. Tommy DeVito is back, so when Russell Wilson throws enough interceptions and they move to Jameis Winston and Jameis Winston has thrown enough interceptions, like it's Tommy Italiano is coming out and that's going to be fine. Greg Van Rooten, Aaron Stiney, and Chris Manhertz are all kept by them. I'm torn, right? Because Ronan, this is not good team building. I stretch the imagination. This is not good team building. But I'll tell you what, I will be happier watching New York Giants games than I have been in a few years watching this. Because it's going to be a little bit exciting, a little bit explosive. Like, Russell Wilson is a bit boring and was maybe running a system that didn't necessarily suit him fantastically well in Pittsburgh. I don't think he's got much left in the tank, but he does still throw a good deep ball. And they have a good deep option wide receiver. Jameis Winston, similar, will make a lot of mistakes, but will not be afraid to pull that trigger. So you can get some excitement, some high scoring on this, because you don't know what you're getting out of this defense at this point. It could work a bit better than last year, but there's a lot of room to grow from last year. You should get a little bit more excitement, a little bit more explosiveness on offense than what you were getting out of Danny Dimes. You've got that much going for you. You've got a pretty high draft pick. If you're not in love with any of these quarterbacks, which seems to be a recurring thing, maybe you add another top-end wide receiver and you have a bit of an exciting track meet team kind of thing. Maybe you can put up 24-plus points a game and keep it competitive, keep eyes on it, keep bums in seats, keep the ownership happy. Is that maybe what's happening here?
Yes, I think this definitely stinks of a regime that knows it's in trouble, that needs to have a good year to keep the jobs of the GM and the coach and everyone else involved, and they're basically making do best as they can to turn this into an acceptable football product. Obviously last year was tough. in terms of the Danny Dimes situation deteriorating to get Cunningham mid-season. Obviously, Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles and winning a Super Bowl for them. So just overall, not a great year for Big Blue. And they basically come into this offseason going, okay, Dayball, the seat is at least warm, probably hot, let's be frank. And there's going to be a lot of pressure here to turn this around. And you bring in Russell Wilson, who's fine, but he just runs the Russell Wilson offense, which at this stage is just very middle of the pack. And then you bring in Jameis Winston, who's just spin the wheel, see what happens. It could be 30 TDs, it could be 30 interceptions, it could be both. But as you say, it'll be more fun as an outside observer to watch either of those guys at the helm than Danny Dimes, who was almost watchable at times in recent years, and Tommy DeVito equivalently. But is it better? Does it lead to more wins? Maybe a handful, but not enough to turn them from, a bottom of the barrel team into anything more than mediocre. It kind of feels like, and as you say, the supporting cast wasn't really changed. They signed like an offensive lineman basically, and there are fun players there like Malik Neighbors, and they had some other fun players like a running back, but the offensive line was a major issue. So unless they make a major upgrade there during the draft, which may or may not happen, they may still be relying on like busts like Evan Neal to kind of fill in again. So I'd be worrying there. And then on the defense, it definitely feels they just went, okay, the defense was awful, we just need to throw money at it. And so they throw a lot of money at Paulson Adebo, who I felt like was the weakest of the elite cornerback options. He basically got paid the same as the other highest paid quarterbacks in the free agency market, but he had a major injury last year, and he's more of a physical cornerback, press quarterback, and he's good, but was he at the level of like a Travarius Ward in terms of his peak, or someone like that? I would be doubtful, but he basically got the same type of contract as him and Carl Davis, so we'll see. And then Javon Holland, a good player in the first couple of years, but definitely had a fall off after an injury in year 3, so another big risk there. And then some other signings like Johnson Colston and Roy Robertson Harris to kind of fill in the gap. So I don't know, it just feels like every year there's a team or two that just feel like they kept the same coach just to say, oh, maybe they can turn it around. But I think everyone who's outside, who looks at it objectively, goes, this probably isn't going to turn around, and you're probably going to have to just tear this down a year from now. And that is how I feel about the Giants. That's not the fault of the players who were signed this offseason necessarily. I said maybe some of them are just washed or past it or are not quite at that level, but it just feels like where this is going. So unfortunately, I can't really give this free agent signing much of a grade beyond pass at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you what, there'll be a lot of passing from Russell Wilson and James Winston in there. I'd say they'll be chasing a lot of games and taking a lot of shots. Very good. Let's have a little look at a roundup of the free agents position by position. We'll go kind of quickly enough through these because we'll have talked about some of them. So we said Geno Smith is over in Vegas now with the trade from Seattle. They extended him 2 years, $85.5 million. Makes sense. They just want someone to be a rudder on that ship, really.
Yeah, and reunites him with Pete Carroll, who obviously kind of resurrected his career in Seattle, and I think that makes a lot of sense. He seems very happy to have got out of Seattle, where I think the commitment from John Schneider, the GM, was lukewarm based on the comments that he's made. So he gets to go to Vegas, to the nice dome and stuff like that, and to a team where expectations won't be super high, but will be high enough where I think they're a team that will appreciate if they get to like 9 or 10 wins. Seattle fans at the moment. So
and also Geno Smith strikes me as a man who will enjoy having a high quality tight end to pass you.
Yeah, and I think just him and Pete seem to get on really well. So I think if you're a Vegas fan, is this a sustainable way of doing things? Probably not. Like, it's a 2 or 3 year type situation, but to be honest, that feels appropriate for a Vegas team, doesn't it?
Yeah. We talked about Sam Darnold landing in Seattle. Justin Fields is in New York. He's now with the Jets, a 2-year, $40 million contract. Good money for him. But yeah, that's the Jets.
The Jets are definitely have rebuild vibes. They obviously have a new head coach. They're putting in Justin Fields as a placeholder. If he obviously plays well, he could earn himself an extension, like guys like Geno Smith or Sam Darnold have done. But based on his play up to this point and being in a kind of quickly moving rebuilding scenario, it'll be difficult for him to do so. But he's got that. He's got that intrinsic talent, obviously, as a runner, and he does have a good arm. But he just needs, if he can get a good coach who can teach him how to do more of the quote unquote boring quarterback stuff, then all the potential is there, but it hasn't been unlocked so far. And obviously, another year, a different team, different OC, it's not the best scenario
Yeah.
for your own quarterback to develop under.
At least there's decent supporting cast around in the Jets for the most part on that offense. Daniel Jones has ended up in Indianapolis on a 1 year, $14 million deal. Good shape by him because that's a spot where he'll almost certainly start at least a couple of games. They seem to be kind of pushing past their rookie era at this point, saying he now has to compete for the starting role.
Yeah, I think Richardson obviously on thin ice after last year. He's had his injury concerns. He obviously took himself off the field last year when he wasn't injured. So I think just everything suggests that Richardson isn't at the right space in terms of his preparation, in terms of his mental approach, in terms of his leadership to be a franchise quarterback. And so they bring in someone, Daniel Jones, who's not the most exciting option, but enough to maybe light a fire under him. But yeah, definitely the Richardson is guaranteed to be starter era is over in Indianapolis, and he's going to earn the right to kind of get back up to the hype that he had coming in when he was drafted so high up in the first
Yeah,
round.
and we've talked about this previously, I think, on the podcast, but the last 6 winning Super Bowl teams had a previous New York Giants first round pick on their roster. So this is a good move for Indianapolis if they believe in that as an important portent, we'll say. A couple of other ones that moved around. Jacoby Brissett's now in Arizona, 2 years, $12 million. Mason Rudolph's in Pittsburgh, 2 years, $7.5 million. Mac Jones is in San Francisco, 2 years, $8.4 million. Kenny Pickett is now in Cleveland, trade for Dorial Thompson-Robinson and a 5th round pick. And Joe Milton is now in Dallas, where they did a 5th for 7th round pick swap. If your team is still looking, your best remaining free agent targets are Aaron Rodgers, who's heavily linked with going to Pittsburgh, Kirk Cousins, who they're apparently waiting towards the draft, but basically they have passed a deadline for owing him a lump more money, and they have an owner who apparently is not mad happy about the idea of essentially paying Kirk Cousins $90 million to not be on the team. So we'll see what can be done there. Drew Lock and Joe Flacco. So it's not a great position to be in, we'll say. Let's move on to skill position players. Ones that we didn't talk about, DK Metcalf, he's now in Pittsburgh. They traded a 2nd round and 6th rounder this year for him and a 7th rounder for next year. They gave him a 5-year, $150 million extension. It's a good chunk of money. He's a very good player, but as you said, has maybe some character question marks or locker room question marks. The Steelers are kind of famous at this point for being able to manage big personalities in their locker room. Although, as you said, pairing him and Pickens together might be too much for Mike Tomlin to handle.
Yeah, especially if you throw Aaron Rodgers in there, which seems still to be most likely outcome. That's a lot of personality, right? So
it is. It's a lot going on for anyone.
I don't know how the Steelers way will survive contact with that combination of personalities. Like, look, as I said, like I regret seeing DK Metcalf leave Seattle. He is a great wide receiver. Like, there's certain things he isn't as good at, but the things he's good at, he's really, really good at. I think he's still a top 12, top 10 type wide receiver. And the things that they want to do, run the ball, go for the deep shots, I think he can work really well within that type of offense. As I say, it's just mostly an issue of like throwing him and George Pickens together. And Pickens obviously is a spiky personality, and now he's basically the wide receiver 2. He's been demoted, and then you throw in a quarterback who's enigmatic. If they end up with Aaron Rodgers or a rookie, if they end up drafting someone instead, or Kenny Pickett, it's a lot, right? But in terms of what he does in the field, that probably won't be the problem. But when he's off the field and throwing his helmet around and getting into fights, that might be where things become more of an issue. Like, Tomlin's a great coach and he can handle a lot, but even he might have bitten off more than he can chew by throwing all those type of people together. Yeah,
Davante Adams has finally decided to sever the umbilical cord between himself and Aaron Rodgers. He's off to the Rams on a 2-year...
Or Derek Carr.
a $46 million contract. So decent money for him. He showed he still had some left in the tank with the Jets last year. This makes sense. Obviously, they're looking to fill in the snaps that Kupp was taking beforehand. So, like, a good spot to be a high-end 2. And, yeah, just kind of... provided his legs are still working, that makes sense to me.
It was up and down with the Jets, but you saw breakout games where you could see the things he's good at, he's still good enough at that he can be a viable wide receiver 2. And then obviously Puka Nacua is now the wide receiver 1 there and will take a lot of attention away. So I think this is a good scenario. And obviously with Sean McVay and Matt Stafford in tow, it's hard not to see him probably having a pretty good season, if not a very good season, and been back to his best. So
Yeah.
good luck to him, and I think has a lot more left in attack than Cooper Kupp, in my opinion.
Yeah, we talked about Diggs, we talked about Cooper Kupp, a few other ones that are knocking around. So Evan Ingram, the tight end, is now in Denver on a 2-year, $23 million contract. Deebo Samuel is in Washington. They traded a fifth-round pick for him. Christian Kirk is now in Houston. They traded a seventh-round pick for him. Najee Harris is in the Chargers, a 1-year, $5.25 million deal. Javonte Williams is now with Dallas, 1-year, $3 million. Rico Dowdle in Carolina, 1-year, $2.75 million. Jordan Mason, running back, is in Minnesota, traded for San Francisco for a sixth-round pick, and Tyler Conklin, the tight end, is now with the Chargers on a 1-year, $3 million deal. So if you are looking for a skill position player, your best options that are free agents at the moment are Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, J.K. Dobbins, Nick Chubb. Dallas Goddard is probably available in trade, and Mo Ali Cox. So you see kind of a lot of age, some injury risk sitting in there. Like Amari Cooper got traded last year and didn't really do anything. Keenan Allen had a couple of big games, but has definitely slowed down a bit. J.K. Dobbins injury risk, Nick Chubb coming off the injury. Like there's guys there, but I imagine it's kind of people are waiting out to see what they can get their hands on in the draft, and then we'll backfill in empty spots or backup spots with these guys.
Yeah, and that's going to be pretty normal now. Like, I think a lot of veterans even are like, I'd rather just wait till training camp comes up properly, or even skip training camp completely and just sign at their convenience. Like, I think you see here a very big drop-off. Like, Evan Ingram's probably the only really notable name, maybe outside of Deebo Samuel getting traded, and even he's kind of washed, it feels like. But yeah, like the running back market was basically non-existent. Like you compare this to last year, you had Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley getting free agency, and now it's like, oh, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, and Rico Dowdle, and Williams and Rico Dowdle basically just swapped between Carolina and Dallas anyway. So yeah, not the most inspiring stuff overall. But yeah, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, at least they have veteran presence there that might be good as a complement to a young wide receiver room. But I don't think either of them are at the level where their game is probably not where their name is at this point.
No. Offensive line side of things, probably two big names that we haven't talked about. Laremy Tunsil is now in Washington. They traded a third round and seventh round pick this year and a second round pick next year. Second and fourth round pick next year for Tunsil, and a fourth rounder for this year from Houston. So obviously it's a lot of change happening in Houston. They got rid of Shaq Mason, traded away Kenyon Green, and so on. A bit of a big turnaround there for Washington. Tunsil has for the majority of his career been a top end tackle. Maybe was not on his best form last year, but you want to build around your rookie quarterback. This seems like a smart move to me.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those situations where there was a lot of interesting debate when this happened. Like, obviously, this is someone who's been a top-level left tackle throughout most of his career. Had a bit of a down year last year, probably highlighted by a lot of flags that he wouldn't have had previously. But I think guys who are more into the advanced analytics suggested he was still having a good pass rush win rate versus the edge rushers. So if he can still pass protect, and obviously he gets a bit of a help because he's going to be protecting Jaden Daniels, who's very good at escaping even if there is pressure on him. It's fine. I think it mostly felt like because Houston, the vibes were bad. Tunsil is not a culture, a great for the culture. It feels like he's obviously had like lots of interesting stories about him between the bong mask and when he got traded away from Miami, going, oh, I take that for me. These type of comments don't suggest someone who's necessarily like the leader of your locker room. But I think for Washington, a team that obviously has so much hope and so much excitement around them, I think he could fit in there and build something solid there. But yeah, it just feels like Houston, they're like, we want to build a different type of culture, and they don't think Tunsil was consistent with that. And I think Washington could benefit greatly from this, and hopefully make the most of it, get Jaden Daniels really going this year.
Yeah, and Drew Dalman, the center, is now in Chicago on a 3-year, $42 million deal. This is part of a larger package of Chicago moves. As we said, they're kind of the idea of having your young rookie and building around. So they also traded for Joe Tootie for a fourth-round pick from the Chiefs, and Jonah Jackson at guard for a sixth-round pick. So I like all these moves that Chicago have made. It makes a lot of sense. I always think this building in the middle and kind of like getting your line set is probably the best way to try and turn around a young rookie's career.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about the Dooney and Jackson trades last time because it happened just before free agency, and I think Dooney, he's an elite guard, bit older, but obviously brings a great floor to that line and can be a really experienced presence in the locker room who can help coach up hopefully the rest of the room. Jonah Jackson, was a free agent acquisition for the Rams who didn't work out, but played really well for the Bears, and obviously The head coach there will have experience with him there. And Drew Dahlman, more of a finesse center, but someone who's been kind of rock solid for Atlanta for several years now, and they'd hopefully just bring solidity to that. That's a really important relationship between there and the center. And I do like, because there's almost a mirror here with Minnesota, who did a similar thing where they basically redid their interior line. They signed Will Fries, who's coming off a major injury, but did show really high upside for Indianapolis, and they also then signed Ryan Kelly, also from Indianapolis. And Indianapolis, outside the 1 year at the end of the Frank Reich era, have generally had good offensive lines, and they were good last year. They weren't really the problem, most people would agree. And so they basically shore things up there and get rid of two longer run guys, Bradbury and Ingram there. And we already discussed Bradbury because he got signed by New England, but both of them are probably guys who, undersized, got beat a lot, played well for the physical limitations they had, but were physically limited. I think getting a more solid rough and tumble line makes sense. And obviously, similar to Chicago, they're obviously most likely investing in their young quarterback JJ McCarthy to be the future of their franchise. Though a lot more uncertainty there, given he's coming off a major injury, unless it fucking ends up being Aaron Rodgers, which I don't think they want to do. But Aaron Rodgers Aaron Rodgers is definitely trying to manifest it.
He is, yeah. He's out in the beach manifesting hard. If you're in the market for an offensive lineman, you're probably looking at Tyron Smith, Jedrick Wills, Joe Noteboom, David Andrews, Brandon Schrafe, or Dalton Reisner are probably your top options at the moment. There's a lot of these guys are off the board already. So,
and it's not going to be cheap. These, I think even more than the skill position we talked about, these guys are going to wait out, and they'll know they'll get decent money probably early training camp, mid training camp. And there was a lot of money given out in free agency even beyond what we talked about. Dan Moore, who's pretty mediocre, got 4 years, 82 million. Aaron Banks, who's been solid for San Francisco, but not amazing, 4 years, 70 million. I think even the Chiefs, they end up signing a backup tackle for San Francisco, Jalen Moore, to 2 years, 30 million. So yeah, don't expect these guys to come cheap.
No.
Whatever they do decide to come off the board.
I think your only hope is them getting spooked by the amount of linemen in the draft this year. That's about it.
Which is more of an issue for the interior guys, that the tackle class won't be too strong.
No,
so
and also the amount of plug and play first day starters that you're getting are always more of a risk.
Yeah, I think Tyron Smith and Jedrick Wills will probably find a home with not too much difficulty once the draft is cleared out of the system.
Yeah. Okay, let's move over to the defensive side. So let's go first line. So you get your linemen, your edges, your DTs, and so on. We talked about Milton Williams. Jonathan Allen is now at Minnesota, 3 years, $60 million after he was cut by Washington. Minnesota doing quite a bit of work here because they also pick up Javon Hargrave for a 2 year, $30 million. So they're trying to kind of do a lot of work on that defensive line.
Yeah, so Allen cut by Washington, probably just was considered a scheme fit. We're now moving. There's been a big move from kind of plug gapping, more interested in plug gapping to the defensive lineman away from the kind of more piercing defensive lineman, which Allen is a high level at that latter skill set. But obviously Minnesota considered they can still get some value out of him in terms of his pass rush ability. And Javon Hargrave was a big free agency winner a few years ago for San Francisco, coming off a major injury. They're obviously just hoping to bulk that up. And similarly to the offensive line, Minnesota bulking up their offensive line, bulking up their defensive line. And similarly, we talked about Chicago bulking up their offensive line, also bulking up their defensive line. They go for a young, high upside, low floor pass rusher in free agency, Dio Digbo, and they also signed Grady Jarrett, who's cut by Atlanta. Bit of an overpay considering how old Grady Jarrett is, but it's an interesting move. I think the only other major move on the defensive line was Josh Sweat going to Arizona, 4 years, $76 million, so a nice chunk of change for him there, and obviously reuniting him with Gannon, under who he had a great relationship in the Eagles a couple of years before Gannon left last year. But as I said, the one that kind of stood out to me as unusual was Tershawn Wharton. It kind of felt like Carolina were spurned by the Milton Williams deciding to go to New England when they threw all the money at him, and they go, oh, who's a backup defensive lineman on a Super Bowl team? Tershawn Wharton. Okay, we'll give him 3 years, $45 million. This makes a lot of sense.
It's a tasty contract he got there, I gotta say.
I know, as a Chiefs fan, does Tershawn Wharton strike you as a 3 years, $45 million?
No, guy? He does not. He does not. He strikes me as I'm pretty happy getting him on a 2 year, $16.5 million contract.
And to be fair, very thin group, Javon Kinlaw, who's been a disappointing former first rounder, 3 years, $45 million from Washington. On the edge, you're seeing 1 year kind of 14 to 12 million contracts for guys like Hassan Reddick and Joey Bosa, who are probably both quite likely washed. Malcolm Kuntz, I think, 1 year 11 million is probably a more reasonable type contract. At least he's young and has some upside, even if he hasn't proven much yet.
Well, obviously, if you're in the hunt for someone on this kind of first line of your defense, trade target Trey Hendrickson. Although, as we said, it sounds like they're looking for quite a spicy trade option for that. Bryce Huff is available by trade as well. Zadarius Smith, Von Miller, and Fatukasi is all out there as well. So
there's not much.
There's not a lot. Now the trade options are okay, but it's what it'll cost to take them and what your contract you're gonna have to give out to them and so on is.
Unless you want a rotational old guy pass rusher, you don't have many options left outside of drafting well this year, I'm afraid.
No. Second level of defense, your linebackers and your box safety, strong safety kind of stuff. Tulonga Hufanga is now in Denver, 3 years, 39 million. They also picked up Drake Greenlaw for 3 years, 31.5 million. So they're kind of doing a bit of rebuilding in that spot. Kind of makes sense to me. I think it'll work out well. They're Denver obviously looking at, wow, we're ahead of where we plan to be, given their performance late in last year. So they're trying to add a couple of veteran pieces to try and help re-up that defense. And these are fine. I don't think they're massive overpays. They're not phenomenal. They don't have my jaw on the ground, but they're fine. Pretty solid.
Like the safety and linebacker position, I think they're getting a little bit more respect with the way that schematic changes have occurred over the last couple of years, but they're still not being paid at the level that they perhaps would be compared to like defensive linemen who got a lot of money this time. I think Hufanga and Greenlaw are both really high upside plays, but both with kind of high risk. Like Hufanga obviously burst into the league with San Francisco and looked like the next great like safety in the league, kind of didn't really live up to the expectation because he had a number of injuries in San Francisco, but if he can reignite his career, he could be a really great acquisition for them. And Greenlaw is basically the same. Like, he was also great with San Francisco, obviously came off a major injury after the Super Bowl last year, and kind of played briefly last year, looked okay, but if he gets back to his best, he is like a Pro Bowl, all-pro type linebacker, so you got to be pretty happy with that. But yeah, beyond that, there wasn't too much left in the market. Like, you had Justin Reed finally leaving the Chiefs, going to New Orleans. I don't know why New Orleans, like, they basically restructured stuff again, and they started signing players again. Don't ask me why. Like, it just New Orleans, stupid. We'll talk about that more in the division by division previews, I'm sure. But then the rest of the market at this position was still very light. Like, guys like Chin went to Vegas, Divine Diablo went to Atlanta, Cody Barton went to Tennessee, but these contracts were getting into less than 10 million per year. So outside of those like headline guys, there really wasn't too much juice in the market this year, despite the it feels like more interest in this position, just maybe not the talent is there at the moment. Probably it'll require some time for the college pipeline to build up again once players realize actually they will get decent contracts at this position.
If you're still in the hunt, Jermaine Pratt should be available via trade. Kazir White's out there, and so is Justin Simmons, I suppose. And on to the third level of defense, so our cornerbacks, free safeties kind of stuff. We talked about Carlton Davis and Paulson Debo. Travarius Ward is now in Indianapolis, 3 years, $54 million. They also signed safety Cameron Bynum for 4 years, $60 million, obviously trying to beef up the back end of that defense. Ward obviously had kind of personal family catastrophes in California, and just kind of wanted a fresh start somewhere else. He said he was struggling to work there, so hopefully this will be a nice fresh start for him, and Indianapolis will be able to get back to the way he was playing beforehand. Pairing it with Cameron Bynum should make a decent impact on the back end of that defense, I think, the pair of them.
Yeah, like there are issues for Indianapolis, but I think one of the issues that they've had in recent years, the defensive backfield will be, I think, much better now. I think Ward has shown, both with the Chiefs and earlier in his San Francisco career, that he can be a high-level cornerback, at least a cornerback 2-level type player. And Cameron Bynum was a really great chess piece for Brian Flores in Minnesota. So if they're willing to get experimental and like try some interesting things, I think he'll be a great fit there. So yeah, they lost a bunch of offensive linemen and the quarterback situation's in flux, but hey, you fixed the defensive backfield finally, so that's something at least. And the defensive backfield, they're getting decent money. We talked about the big extensions for guys like Stingley, and you saw Trevor Mayer get a decent contract. He's a good safety. I think he should be solid for Carolina, who I think, as I said, once they they lost Milton Williams were just spending a bit of money, I felt like, just to make up for that. And DJ Reed, I think, going to Detroit, that's a great fit. I think he's a very aggressive man type corner that just kind of feels very Detroit-like. And he's been very solid for the Jets there for several years. And yeah, I think you saw CJ Gardner-Johnson getting traded to Houston in exchange for Kenyon Green. That's a very Philly type move. Get rid of the older guy, get in a young experimental guy, see what you can get out of it. Brandon Stevens probably got overpaid a little bit by the Jets, which, you know, we'll see how that works out. Darius Slay ends up in Pittsburgh, another big personality. We'll see how that works out. And, you know, for those who track the nickel cornerback, Nate Hobbs did get a nice 4-year, $48 million contract, so good for him.
Yeah, no, it's decent enough on a lot of those. If you're still looking for one of these, Jerry Alexander's available via trade. Asante Samuel Jr., Stephon Gilmore, Rasul Douglas are all out there. If you're looking for a nickel, maybe Mike Hilton, and safety Julian Blackman.
Yeah, and Gilmore's just going to get those 1-year contracts forever, it feels like.
Yeah, I think so. Special teams, I suppose. A couple of the names that got signed. Riley Dixon is in Tampa Bay, 2-year, $6 million. Stonehouse in Miami, 1 year, $1.75 million. Sam Martin's in Carolina. Johnny Hecker's in Tennessee. Joey Sly is in Tennessee. None of these are massive contracts. They're all around the 1.3 to 1.5 area. If you're looking for a special teamer, you want a kicker, Nick Folks out there. You want a punter, Pat O'Donnell's out there. Not exactly high wattage, but you know.
Yeah, like Dixon got a nice contract here. The rest of them kind of got around the same. And Tennessee, like Hecker and Sly, they're kind of reuniting with John Fossil, the kind of well-known special teams coach. I like that for Hecker because he's had a great relationship with him in the past. But Joey Sly instead of Nick Folk. Like Nick Folk, the man just kicks field goals really well every year, and then PB just gets cut. I don't know. He must be a real asshole or something.
I'd say he must be.
Yeah. So look, he'll end up somewhere and kick well for you. So good luck to you if you happen to be the lucky team in that case.
Yeah. So that kind of wraps up where we are with the...
cleans the deck before we get into the draft analysis.
Yeah, because the draft is obviously going to be upcoming, and that's going to be our next kind of focus point for the off season. So we will be coming in with a review of or preview, I suppose, of some of the top players at a couple of the positions and like who to keep an eye out on stuff. And obviously we will then also be returning with our incredibly accurate mock drafting. We are real tape dogs for the college game. We know the ins and outs in a way that many don't. Many don't know any of the names, and I know at least 3, so that's fine.
Yeah, and to be honest, we kind of reference this at points like this is not the most exciting offseason. Like last offseason, a lot of things changed and the NFL was changed forever. This offseason, it feels like some things will change. Like the Titans might be better, but the kind of major shifts, both in free agency, as we've just seen, and in the draft, might not be quite as significant, it feels like. But look, prove me wrong, NFL. Prove me wrong.
Do you think a 5-yard change in the kickoff rules isn't going to change the face of the NFL? It's not the most high wattage, but I think particularly for those of us who are, looking at holes on rosters, trying to work out where your team is going, or in your case, kind of trying to figure out what the big vision board is looking like. I think how this draft goes will be quite informative for a number of teams, because I think it's easy in the drafts that have, the big high names or the 3 or 4 quarterbacks. It's kind of easy to focus on that narrative and not see where teams are building and doing their work elsewhere. So at least it might bring some of that into focus this time around, if I'm trying to spin positive on it.
If you love interior offensive linemen and you love interior defensive linemen, this is a good draft to be involved in. There's also some fun running backs, including Ashton Genty, who we'll talk about.
There is quite a lot of good running backs in this one. There's good running backs. So if you
like old school football,
it's
back, baby.
That it is. Well, I suppose that's kind of it for this episode. Any plans for the next kind of week or two? I suppose it'll probably be about 2 weeks or so before we're doing our previewy bits, right?
Yeah, so the NFL draft will be in around the time you listen to this, probably in 2 weeks' time. So we'll have that out probably like a few days before the draft is coming. But yeah, it'll be exciting enough. As for myself, nothing too exciting lined up at the moment. Probably just enjoy the good weather while we have it, and get into that. As you say, get into the draft tape and see if I can understand the draft analysis at a higher level.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's going to be gardening, playing a bit of Dungeons and Dragons, and gardening. So very exciting altogether, you know. I'm waiting for my hands to heal. I kind of want to get out and play a bit of golf as well, but the blisters in the hands are not conducive to that, and I presume I'm only going to make them worse when I go back gardening tomorrow. So we'll see. But yeah, that'll wrap us up for now, I suppose. So it's bye from myself, bye from Ronan.
Bye.
This has been all four quarters. Thanks for listening. We'll chat to you next week.